All right, Shalom, first and foremost, giving all praise to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai Bahashem Rahakudash, double honors to the elders and apostles at Great Millstone who rule well, peace and blessings to the hopeful elect, Shalom to the men of the Lord, prophesying, preaching, and teaching on the highways and byways in sincerity and in truth, Shalom, Barakatham, and Lord's will in this lesson, man, I'm gonna go in a little bit of a longer form of the Renaissance period. But you see, I have a video here queued up called "History of Ideas: The Renaissance," because this is a major stumbling block for a lot of Christians. You know, some people will agree with who Rome is, who the beast is, and how that whole thing plays out about Satan being loosed and all of these different scenarios. But when you just look clearly back on the history of what happened, which Esau is going to explain it to you here in a good bit, and not everything in this video is good, but some of it is on point, and you'll clearly see that the scriptures foretold this very time period, the what's called the Renaissance, which is also known as the rebirth. All right, so when you do a tiny bit of critical thinking, you get to put together what it all means. Why did they call it rebirth? Who were they before? And, most importantly, what do the scriptures have to say about it? So Lord willing, I'll go through this and bring out the precepts, and y'all brothers be edified. Let's play some of this here.
The phenomenon known as the Renaissance is one of the standard stops on any tour through the history of Western culture. It encompasses a roughly 300-year period in Europe where architects, poets, and philosophers reconnected with the style and ambitions of ancient Greek and Roman civilization. The reasons for studying the Renaissance nowadays are often left a bit unclear. To the high-minded and respectful, the rationale may seem utterly obvious, or to the more impatient or technologically focused, the exercise can equally well appear a complete waste of time. We believe that the main reason to study history is to rescue certain good, provocative, and inspiring ideas that have been lost in the past, in order to put them to use in relation to the dilemmas and problems of our own times. Our tour of the Renaissance, while seemingly about some old, long-dead guys, will hence really be about us. Florence, Italy, 1469. A 20-year-old nobleman from one of the grandest families of Florence, Lorenzo De Medici, takes over the family business, the Medici Bank, that's been going since 1397 and is the most respected financial institution in Europe, with flourishing branches in Florence, Venice, Rome, and Geneva.
All right, now notice this guy Medici. All right, notice he's in banking. All right, so you're gonna see one of the ways that Esau got back into power, all right, was marrying, all right, getting back some of his riches, and the third thing that allowed him to take back over around this time period was the Black Death, or the Black Plague, which they call it, which I forget what year it has. It occurred. I'll look it up real quick. Okay, so there it is, 1346 to 1353. So this was all a perfect storm. All right, is basically what I'm getting at here. So you have Esau coming into power. He's getting riches. All right, he's reestablishing himself. All right, he's starting to amass wealth. He's marrying Jakes. A lot of that money comes from Jake, who was doing really, really well at the time. We were known as Moors. We were known as we were down there where the Berbers are in North Africa. We were all throughout Europe. All right, the Palatine Boers in the area of Germany, in Ireland, Scotland. All right, definitely Spain. The continent of Iberia was basically Jake. So you keep all of this in mind as this concentration of power. And maybe I'll pull up a map or something to help navigate this, Well, I guess I should just go to maps, but to help navigate this, all right, this concentration of power started in Italy, all right. So the Renaissance era, even though Rome got sacked around 400 AD, all right, and so all of the Goths and Visigoths, they all came from kind of like the north area. But the Renaissance, it kind of started back up here in Florence, all right, and that's where a lot of prominent popes and stuff were from, all right. Naples, that whole area. So this is where Esau started to regather his bearings, and you had Jake all throughout France, Switzerland, definitely in Germany, Belgium, this whole area, all right. You had these monarchies, all right. And so what happened when Esau came back into power, under the guise of the Romans again, he had something called Roman Catholicism. So the church of the Catholic Church basically was the consolidation of all these powers. You had what you call the Catholic monarchs, all right, and it was basically 10 nations, essentially 10 kingdoms, all right. Now today you look at it, you see a bunch of lines drawn and all of this, and you have what you call the Baltic states, not the Baltics, but the I forget the term of it, where they basically got broke up during the Soviet Union. So all of these lines that you see there, these weren't countries more than 100 years ago, man. This has all been, these new borders drawn, this is all recent, all right. But you had kingdoms back in the day, all right. So this guy Medici, he's going to explain how this went into him amassing fortune, and they started producing art and stuff.
Lorenzo, like his uncles and his father before him, was a great gift for business. During his lifetime, the bank will open new outposts in Basel, Bruges, Avignon, and Pisa, and lend significant sums of money to royal courts, aristocrats, and entrepreneurs. Lorenzo and his family are typical of the Florentine upper classes of his age, in honouring the business of making money, without any of the traditional suspicion of trade found in most Christian societies. But not only are the Medicis interested in making money, they are also extremely ambitious about how to spend money. They believe that the express purpose of what we would now call philanthropy is to promote beauty, truth, and wisdom in the world.
Right. So you see this obsession with them wanting to push out a certain image, beauty and truth. Now, what did this ultimately become? Beauty and truth. Ultimately, this is the precursor of white supremacy, essentially, because before this time, you really didn't have people looking at each other as black or white or red, yellow, brown. This is all a fairly recent concept that Esau came up with. Now, go to Revelation 13:1. It says, "And I stood up on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." All right, so this is that first beast, man. All right, the first of the not the first beast in terms of Daniel, but the early beast that was reincarnated, which is the 4th beast in Daniel. Salakia. It says, "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth was at the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat and great authority." All right, so you can see that there's a hierarchy of things going on here. All right, because ultimately this beast spawned out of the Roman Catholic Church. All right, which came to be today modern day NATO, these other nations, the European Union, all these different various names that Esau's come up with from now until then, from then until now. It says, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed." All right, so when he was talking about he was wounded to death, this is talking about Rome. Rome was sacked in 410, all right? And this is written because about 1,000 years, he would be out of power, man. All right? And Jake would basically be in power. So 410 to fast forward 1,000 years, roughly give or take, because, Esau's calendar, and that's another thing. When scriptures say he sought to change times, they had the Gregorian calendar going on, the Julian calendar going on. None of these dates are accurate. So, but you can still kind of see it's roughly about 1,000 years, okay, between 410 to the time period that he's talking about when they first start to come back into power. When did he say they came back? We go back 1300s. All right. So, and then we brought up earlier that the Black Death, the Black Plague, started taking people out around 1350. All right. So you can see up until like the 1300s is when they started making their comeback. And so around the 1400s is when they started getting their power back, man. And what did they start doing? Let's go back.
Intimate and involved.
Salakia.
Beauty, truth, and wisdom in the world.
So going back to this, and it says, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. All right, so his deadly wound being healed goes from him getting sacked in Rome, all right, in 410 AD, because the Roman Empire was vast, right? It went across the whole of Europe. So the Mediterranean Sea was basically the Roman Empire. It went from Egypt all the way around Israel, Mesopotamia, Turkey, the bottom parts of Europe, even expanded up into in England, right? Spain all the way down underneath now. In 410 AD, one thing you got to realize is that the Roman Empire was already kind of split. So you had the Western Roman Empire, right? And then you had the Eastern Roman Empire, which were mainly like Jake. That's what Constantine was at. You know, they moved the capital of Rome here to Istanbul today, which is formerly called Constantinople. All right, named after Constantine. All right. And so you basically had almost like a civil war around that time. And they were all spread too thin. Now, when the Western Roman Empire in 410 AD, they got sacked, that's when they fell. All right. But the Eastern Roman Empire didn't fall the same way. They still had a period of time, and that was where they were ruling still. And that's primarily where Jake was ruling in these areas, man. All right. And then over time, you know, we made our way over into Spain around there, and this whole area was a shit show, man. Esau completely lost everything, man. He wasn't making any kind of innovations. Nothing that he's doing today was he doing in that time, man. It was just what he calls the Dark Ages, you know. But it was only the Dark Ages for the Edomites over here in the Western Roman Empire. All right, so that's basically a little bit of that history there. So when it says all the world wondered after the beast, that's him making a comeback around the 1400s. All right, it says, and they worshiped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto him, who is able to make war with him. All right, so that dragon is this whole Catholic Roman Catholic power structure. All right, because the Pope had the power to unseat a monarch, man. If the King of England committed adultery, he had the power to take him out of there, man. Say, you're no longer king. All right, now get out, you know. And it's similar to today, you know. America basically kind of plays that role. All right, you have all these other Edomite nations, but the chief of them is what's known as Babylon the Great, which is over here in America. All right, so things have shifted, which that's written in Daniel 7. So it says, let's see, and they worship after him, and they say, who was able to make war with him, right? Because around this time and around the Renaissance era, not only were they changing all of this art, like he's getting ready to talk about, but they went all the way around the world, man. You know, by 1493, they was already over in the Western Hemisphere, man, taking over shit.
Lorenzo De Medici's grandfather had started the collection of books that became known as the Medici Library, and Lorenzo now expanded it decisively. with his researchers scouring Europe's monasteries, courts, and libraries for lost or overlooked texts from antiquity. Lorenzo was a patron of many philosophers, including Marsilio Ficino, Poliziano, and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. Under his guidance, these philosophers undertook pioneering researches into Greek philosophy. They absorbed the ideas of Epicurus, Zeno, and Aristotle and tried to harmonize Plato's theories with Christianity. Lorenzo was perhaps...
Right. Do you see that? They were harmonizing all these different philosophers. Epicurus was one of them. They're going to go in about him into Christianity. All right. So this is how Christianity got started, and it was that's philosophy that gave such power to the Catholic Church, man. That false prophet that's spoken about. All right. And under this new religion, all right, they had all of Europe basically subject to this religion. Even though they were their own kings, these 10 horns, the beast consisted of this Roman Catholic Church and that whole system, the papal bulls and all of that, the doctrine of discovery, all of that came out. That came out through this new Christianity, this Catholicism that they're now evangelizing across the world. Now, Catholicism is a lot older than the 1400s, right? That's not the first time that it came out. But this is it being revamped, because before you had the Roman Empire, now you have the Holy Roman Empire, Roman Catholic Empire. Salakia, let me look that up. Let's see. Roman Catholic Empire. May not give it to me, but we'll see. Yeah, it's called the Holy Roman Empire. 1.3 billion people. Right, so it's saying the 476 Common Era, which is not far after the sacking of Rome. So you can see that this idea, it was a lot older than that than the 1400s, but this is the rebirth of it. All right, so going back.
He was best known as a patron of art. His court artists included Verrocchio, Leonardo, Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, and Michelangelo. The patronage was extremely intimate and involved. Michelangelo lived with Lorenzo and his family for 5 years, dining at his table and participating in discussions led by Marsilio Ficino. Although the Medici were quite rich, by modern standards, their fortune was a relatively moderate one. Across 4 crucial decades, from the 1430s to the 1470s, it's estimated that the...
Yeah, you had Jakes in West Africa down there balling at the time too, man. Some parts of Europe as well too, way more than these guys, but this is them coming back up, you know.
Medici family spent the equivalent of around $500 million on intellectual patronage, architecture and artworks, which is a huge sum by comparison with average incomes, but it's not...
So did you see how much they spent? Let me rewind that on architecture and art.
Artworks, which is a huge sum by comparison with average incomes.
Salakia.
Spent the equivalent of around $500 million on intellectual patronage, architecture and artworks, which is...
Intellectual patronage, architecture and artwork. All right, so this is Job 9:24. It says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. All right, and when we say the earth is given into the hand of the wicked, we're talking about that same Renaissance that we just spoke about, when it says his deadly wound was healed. All right, and all the world wondered after the beast. All right, so through the spirit, the Esau was healed, man. All right. And so the earth was given into his hand, and it says he covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So he's basically explaining to you. Now, Esau's not going to come out and tell you. We were basically taking down a bunch of images and portraits and paintings and of things of Negroes. But that's essentially what's going on. Now, why did he spend $500 million, man? A huge portion of his wealth just for artwork, because he's trying to repaint a narrative. He's trying to cover up things. Okay, Jake was all over Europe, right? And Esau was just now burgeoning out of this area of Italy. All right. And with this philosophy, all right, he kept on marrying and forming alliances, and eventually he took back over, especially after the Black Death. You know, you got to remember the plague swept through all of Europe, man. So Esau was able to creep back up in there. Salakia, wrong one there. But you see, it says he covered the faces of the judges thereof, if not where and who is he?
Which is a huge sum by comparison with average incomes, but it's not very substantial by comparison with the wealth of the richest people today. The Medici family resources would be roughly those of Rosetta Caffarata, whose wealth from a fisheries business in Peru is around $1.5 billion US. She is at present the 1,200th richest person in the world. Lorenzo would seem economically unimpressive next to Giorgio Armani, 8.5 billion, and a non-entity next to Bill Gates, 79 billion. Money was important to what Lorenzo and his family achieved, no doubt. So in that respect, the world is amazingly well placed to continue in his footsteps. There's no shortage of money to do the sorts of things he did. But what's holding us back today is a shortage of vision. For the price of this yacht, Lorenzo fueled the Renaissance for 30 years. The secret to the Medici's impact was that they did.
So he fueled the Renaissance, man. So there was an agenda behind this whole thing, man. An agenda, all right? When the scriptures say he thought to change times and all of this other stuff. So this is how the philosophy of Esau is how he got back into power, man. You know?
Didn't see themselves as there simply to hand over the cash to allow artists, architects, and scholars to do whatever they wanted. The Medicis had a vision, a mission for the arts and for philosophy, and were extremely direct and didactic in putting it forward, usefully so.
And so what was their vision, their mission? Why was it so specific? Art is supposed to be something that evolves on its own. Why was this such a specific direction on the art? Why did all of the art look weird and homosexualized, I should say, you know? Homoerotic is the word I guess I'm looking for. Why did it all have this look? Because this guy was trying to paint a narrative, and that narrative was basically white supremacy, because they realized in order for us to take back over, man, we need an identity. And he didn't want to call himself Esau because why? Because the Catholic Church still referenced the Bible. All right, so he couldn't call himself Esau. So he had to come up with a new identity in order for these Edomites to unify. All right, and so this is the precursor to everything that led them to coming over and taking Jake and stripping him of his name, his identity, everything. You know, all of these philosophies that they're talking about. All of that doctrine of discovery, all that's come from these wicked ass Edomites, man, around this time when this deadly wound was healed, all right, and the earth was given back into the hand of the wicked.
Guided by his philosopher friend Ficino, Lorenzo thought of art as a kind of education. Under his patronage, artists were therefore asked to illustrate key philosophical truths about, say, the importance of kindness and compassion. They promoted
which he knew nothing about,
and glorified the best qualities of the state and of good leadership. The Renaissance would never be remembered if its leading members had simply made piles of cash. No one cares about that for any length of time. The real source of its glory was the imagination and intelligence with which its great bankers and financiers set about spending their money. Monastery of...
So again, very, very strategic about the art. Now, most art is just independent people coming together, expressing themselves. That's what art's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a natural expression of nature, of things that naturally occur in the world. All right, not this great commission of specific philosophy to depict certain things. This is how marketing basically started. You know, like Esau's so good at marketing things, and he's gonna get into it.
Fulda, Germany, January 1417. An Italian scholar and humanist, Poggio Bracciolini, is on a tour of Germany and Switzerland Looking for lost Greek and Roman manuscripts, he is spending a few weeks in a Benedictine monastery, hunting around the dusty shelves of its great library, when, in a forgotten nook, he makes one of the great discoveries of the whole Renaissance. He comes across what still remains the only surviving manuscript of Lucretius de Rere Natura, On the Nature of Things, which gives us the most complete account we possess of the philosophy and worldview of the Greek philosopher Epicurus.
There it is.
Circle are astonished. Epicurus has hugely valuable ideas about the human passions, happiness, religion, communal life, and science.
So you can see Esau values the philosophy of Epicurus, man. Now, who were the Epicureans? Let's look up Epicurus and what he was about, man, and it'll all make sense about these philosophies you see over here in Babylon the Great, which leads to hedonism and do without will and all this other bullshit. Epicurus. All right. Epicureanism is a system of philosophy based on the teachings of Epicurus, founded around 307 BC. It teaches that the greatest good is to seek modest pleasures in order to attain a state of tranquility. So this is basically him pleasure seeking, man. Do whatever feels good. All these ideas are what led up to things like doctrine of discovery. All right. Esau says if it pleases you, then do it. That's how they were able to write papal bulls saying we're going to subjugate every man and woman and child that we find in the Western Hemisphere. All right. There's no objective view of morality. All right. He was into the greatest good is to seek modest pleasures in order to attain a state of tranquility, freedom from fear, and absence from bodily pain. All right. So that's the guy that they put as a major staple of their philosophy, man. This guy was very, very important into what ended up being, Esau's philosophy, man. Western philosophy. Look, Western philosophy region, all right? So this is a major tell, and you had Epicureans back in the ancient world, man, who were into this nonsense, and then you had the Stoics, which were basically like the opposite of the Epicureans. But either way, they were going off, man,
This is only the highlight of a career spent rescuing lost manuscripts.
And again, he said they found lost manuscripts. So this shows you they just had this book just sitting in a library somewhere, man. So imagine all the manuscripts they've found since then, man. All the things that they've covered up. Now we know that this is an age where they're trying to drive into philosophy, right? They're trying to drive this thing through art, through writing and literature, and all of these things. They're trying to paint this new identity for themselves. You can see how it's all coming together.
Time Bracciolini is to go on to discover key texts by Cicero, Quintilian, and Vitruvius. When he couldn't buy text, he wasn't averse to a little skullduggery to get what he wanted. He famously bribed a monk to abstract a copy of Livy, the Roman historian, from the library at Hersfeld Abbey in Germany. Bracciolini was hugely interested in classical text, but he was not a scholar as we would understand the term. That is, someone who wants to investigate the past for its own sake and respects the inherent nobility of old books. The Renaissance attitude to history and philosophy was very different. Its intellectual leaders took a relentlessly practical view of things. They wanted, first and foremost, to run their societies successfully, to make their people wise, and to build magnificent cities. The Epicurean philosophy Bracciolini dug up.
All right, that brings a precept to mind. To rebuild their cities, okay? That's all they cared about. All right, this is Malachi 1 and 4. It says, whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, which they were before the Renaissance. That's why they're being reborn. But we will return and build the desolate places. The desolate place, and this precept is multifold. But we know that Rome was desolate. But why? Because the Visigoths and the Goths came in and sacked it, man. They took everything, They raided and, and pillaged, probably took a bunch of women, and they went to a dark depression, you know, for about 1,000 years. And it says, thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts. So when they're trying to rebuild the desolate places, it says, thus saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down. All right. So the Most High said they would build, and which they did. And so what has to happen now? The Most High's got to throw this thing down, man. It says, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever, man. All right. So you're the border of wickedness. This is how we know who you are. Yet another prophecy. All right.
With its emphasis on friendship, simplicity, and the acceptance of limitations, wasn't exciting to him because it was old, but because its wisdom was still needed. He wasn't looking for ancient ideas so he could fill in missing details about how the past used to be, perhaps in order to gain a professorship in a university. Bracciolini was urgently searching for help in creating better ways of thinking for the present. Central Florence, 1484. Michelozzo di Bartolomeo, one of Cosimo de Medici's favourite architects, completes the family home, the Palazzo Medici, just near the city's new cathedral. Michelozzo has studied Roman antiquities closely, and the building's tripartite elevation beautifully expresses the characteristic Renaissance spirit of rationality, order, and harmony. This is a golden age of construction in Florence. Leon Battista Alberti has done the facade of the church of Santa Maria Novella. Brunelleschi has put up the Spidale degli Innocenti and the city's new cathedral dome, and many less well-known names completing squares, fountains, and thoroughfares. The same is true for the other great Renaissance cities of Siena, Venice, Urbino, Mantova, and Rome. City fathers across the Italian peninsula have fallen in love with a remarkable new idea.
The remarkable new idea. Now notice he said this is now 1484. All right. So 100 years have passed, and they're growing now, man. All of these cities are getting raised up. They're building all of this architecture that is basically Rome again. All right. So you can see that this is the Roman Empire, that beast whose deadly wound was healed. All right. And then after they do this, man, what happens? What happens around the 1400s, man? What happens to Jake? He immediately puts his ass in slavery, man. Immediately. Columbus comes in 1492. We know that, right? Already knowing that Jake was over here. And what happens? All of these monarchs. All right, you had the English came over here, Spain, the Spanish came over here, Portugal came over here. All right, the French, the Dutch, which is in this area. All right, all from this seat of power, in Italy. All right, or known as Rome. Let's see what else it says.
Should be the focus of an unparalleled attention to beauty. It's slightly embarrassing to contrast these efforts with our own mess. Sentimental View says that the Renaissance city fathers made nice places because they were lucky. They didn't need to plan for cars, they didn't have zoning laws, and they happened to have access to good quality building materials, like lovely stone you can get from quarries outside Florence. However, successful urbanism...
So you can see when he says lucky, this is the work of the Most High, man. This is prophesied to happen. John the Revelator wrote this down years and years and years ago, 2,000 years ago. So roughly 1,400 years before it happened, this thing was written. All right. So we can see that his deadly wound was healed. All right. And we're not gonna watch the whole video, but you can see where it's going, man. All right. When you get Revelation 20, right? Because he's talking about all of Europe now. You can start seeing them expand across Italy. In an area what's also known as the bottomless pit, which I'll get that real quick. It says let me see. It's like Revelation 20:1. It says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, and he laid hold on the dragon, all right, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. All right. So that 1,000 years is what we talked about here, right? when we said Rome was sacked around 400 AD. Now we see the Renaissance is coming back around 1400 AD. Or current era, however you want to say it. Bound him 1,000 years. Verse 3 says, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should not deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. All right. So this is that part of that deadly wound being healed, but he was shut up, man. All right. It says, and after that he must be loosed a little season. And that little season is the season that we're in now, because it's been roughly 600 years. All right, since he started making his comeback. All right, 600 to 700 years. All right. And what happens when Satan is loosed? Let me go to Revelation 6. Fast forwarding after all of this, it says Revelation 6:3. It says, and when he opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. All right. And there was given unto him a great sword. All right. So this is the time that they would kill one another. They would have all of this technological advancements. All right. And you look at World War I, World War II, all of the civil wars that happened during the 1800s between the English, the French, and the Spanish, the Portuguese. Now let's read that a little bit. In Daniel 7th chapter, it says, the fourth beast in Daniel, by the way, is also referring to that second beast in Revelation. All right. Now, so it says, Daniel 7:19, then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass, which devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with his feet. All right. And the residue is it's basically Jake, man, the remnant of Jake, because Jake got scattered in the first Roman Empire, 70 AD. Sacked the temple, scattered the men of the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was already scattered in the time of the Assyrians. All right. So what did he do? He showed up to the Western Hemisphere to inflict the northern kingdom, and he snatched Jake out of West Africa, man, the southern kingdom. All right. It says, and of the 10 horns that were in his head. All right. So we see another beast. So that's how we know it's the same one. Essentially the same 10 horns that we read about in Revelation. It says, and of which came up, and before whom 3 fell. Now the 3 that fell was the ones who showed up into the Americas over here, man. So we know that this whole Western Hemisphere, right, only speaks about 4 languages, right? There's the French in Canada, in the Haiti, Louisiana area. There's the English that took over the eastern seaboard, the 13 colonies, and then there's the Spanish that took over central Mexico into western United States. All right. So that's the French, the English, and the Spanish, and you had the Portuguese basically down here, in the Brazil area, right? And the Spanish was on the western coast of South America as well too. So that's why in Brazil they'll speak Portuguese, basically, and everything else is basically Spanish. All right. So the 3 that fell were the French, the Spanish, and the English. Now, who did America come out of? America came out of the English. All right. So when you go back to Daniel 7:20, it says, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. So that look, where it goes into vision. All right. And his vision was basically all of the promises that he would make you, man. You know. Look, Hazab, vision. All right. So a vision is like is more of it's an idea. It's an abstract. All right. Which which is what they're selling you on, man. So when it says his look was more stout than his fellows, that means the things that the other nations like Rome, sorry, Salakia, not Rome, that France and Spain and Italy, what they were promising you, these were monarchies, all right, that had rulers. So what did Esau do of that little horn? England too was a monarchy. They promised you things like freedom from all of that, separation of church and state, all right. They promised you freedom of speech, all of these things, the Constitution, this whole new idea of liberty, and every man can be represented by somebody that he votes for, and this was very, very appealing, right? And what happened? A bunch of Edomites flocked over, especially from the Germany area, and they flooded the United States, man, under this leadership, this guise of the United States, this new look, which is more stout than his fellows, man. All right. And this is how he started to this is the formation of the whore of Babylon. All right. Because basically what happened was Esau was promising you separation of church and state, which was a very, very big thing at the time. Why? Because they were still coming off of this Catholic monarchy bullshit. All right. And so what happened was the founding fathers of America, they were not into that Roman Catholic shit. They were basically another sect of Edomites called Masons. The Masons basically came here, the Freemasons, they came here and laid the foundation of America, which was different. Their philosophy was in this other witchcraft, which is different from the Catholicism. All right. So that's why all these different ideas came from, all of this freedom of speech and everything they came up with in the Bill of Rights and all of that, but they're still the same devils, all right, you know. So this is the history of it, you know.
Should be the focus of an unparalleled attention to beauty. It's slightly embarrassing to contrast these efforts with our own mess. A sentimental view says that the Renaissance city fathers made nice places because they were lucky. They didn't need to plan for cars, they didn't have zoning laws, and they happened to have access to good quality building materials, like lovely stone you can get from quarries outside Florence. However, successful urbanism is never an accident. For the Renaissance, it was a philosophical mission. The Renaissance built such great cities because of an idea, but we are to a large extent shaped by the character of the buildings around us. Making sure that the public realm conveys dignity and calm is more than a luxury. It can help to ensure the sanity, vigour and happiness of a whole population. What's more, the urbanists and architects believed in rules. They didn't think it was chance that a city looked good. They wrote volumes codifying what works and what must be avoided. In their efforts to systematise and in their careful thinking about what makes a good street corner, pavement or bench, they put our own efforts at urbanism to shame. They believed in ideal dimensions for squares, that a square should be small enough that a mother can call from an upper window to her child playing at the other side. They thought that all good squares should have large elaborate fountains in the middle, but that the surrounding buildings should mostly be fairly plain. They knew that buildings should be around 5 stories in height, and that there should be graceful covered arcades, so that citizens could amble in all kinds of weather. Renaissance leaders like the Medici were marked by the views of the ancient Roman historian Sallust, who'd been deeply hostile to a situation that had developed in the decadent periods of Rome, where there had been, in his words, publicae egestas privatim opulentia, public squalor and private opulence. Sallust believed, and the Renaissance leaders hugely embraced his idea, that in a healthy society, the public sphere itself should be opulent, that is, beautiful, refined and appealing. That way, the richer people in society will never be tempted to withdraw and concentrate exclusively on their own private estates and comforts, and all citizens will be uplifted by a pleasing vision of communal life.
Right. So this is basically Esau trying to rebuild himself, you know. coming up with all these different philosophies of architecture, but it's all a remix of the former ways of the Romans, all right, which are the Edomites, written about in the scriptures. So I'll get a few more precepts and close this out. This is Psalms 2. I'm sorry, at 1 it says, why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? It says, the kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord Yahweh and against his anointed. All right, and that's basically what the Renaissance era was, man. This was these kings, mainly Esau, all right, taking counsel against the Most High because they knew who we were. All right, they had all those manuscripts like we talked about earlier. They had access to different archaeological sites. You saw how much effort and energy they were putting into their architecture and their art and their philosophies and all of this shit. That's a spirit the Most High put on them to do that. It says, and against the Lord Yahweh and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall have them in derision, man. So this is what Esau planned to do, and that's basically what he did in the slave trade and the events leading up after the 1493 papal bull, you know. After all of that, you know. So this is Psalm 71 and 1. It says, for mine enemies speak against me, and they that lay wait for my soul take counsel together. All right, and that's basically what the whole thing was. Just Esau was priming himself up to enslave Jake and take over the world, really, because people think Esau just wanted to take over the Western Hemisphere, but no. But what happened after that, man? You see him in South Africa. All right, he's definitely over here. You see him in South Africa. You see him in Hong Kong. He took over Australia. All right, he's nuked Japan and put a massive military over there. Same thing in Korea. He didn't nuke them, but he got a major military garrison over there. All right, he's encroaching eastward with NATO from here in Europe. All right, he's heavily involved in the Middle East. You know, he's just been completely terrorizing that place for I don't know how long. All right, so this guy never had any plans on stopping, ever. All right. It says, for my enemies speak against me, and they that lay wait for my soul take counsel together, saying, God hath forsaken them. Persecute and take him, for there is none to deliver him. And that's what Jake was, man. That's written in Deuteronomy, man. It says, none shall redeem you. All right. That's what that was. He came over and took advantage of the situation. All right. Last precept, and I'll close this out. This is Psalm 64 and 2. It says, hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers of iniquity. And that's exactly what the whole Renaissance era was, the rebirth of Esau, the hiding of the true Israelites, our true identity. All right, the changing of times and seasons and things like that. You know, which that's written when we go back to Daniel 7 and 20, you go to 25. All right, he says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times. All right, so the scriptures all tie together, man. They're perfectly on point, you know. Perfectly on point, you know. So I know this was a bit of a longer episode, but hopefully y'all brothers were edified, you know, on terms of some history of this devil, and which indicates this devil's future. All right, because if the prophecy predicted what already happened, well, it stands to reason the prophecy is going to predict what hasn't happened yet, you know. So this is a major win, and this is why Esau didn't want us reading in slavery, you know. You know, he wanted to keep us away from the scriptures and from the understanding, and he did everything in his power to break our mind, our psychology. He fed us poison. He called us things like black, and tried to pacify us with welfare and feminism and all this other bullshit. But it didn't work. Ezekiel 37 is still coming to pass, man. So with that, hopefully y'all brothers were edified. Call halal Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai Bahashim Rachak Wadash Wa Abba Babal Shalom.